Shout out to Braven Brewing Company, who's keeping you chilled and cold and relaxed, along with Brooklyn Gin. Hopefully you guys got some Auto Tacos. And these guys specifically requested Dippin' Dots, I was told. So hopefully...
Yeah, the Living in the Future song and the Ice Cream in the Future.
So hopefully you guys got some Dippin' Dots. My name's Josh Barron. I've been privileged to know these guys for quite some time, interview these guys, and most importantly, like all of you, watch these guys live for the arc of their career, which has been awesome. This is Songkick Live. We've been doing this for about 7 years. It started in our London headquarters way back when. It's now here in New York, and we're excited to have you here. It's something we're really proud of, where we get to bring some of our favorite bands and connect them with some of their biggest fans. So I have some questions for Taylor. We got some questions from you guys, so we're going to run through them. I know we're on a limited schedule, so you're going to be seeing these guys load out. So it's all in real time, just like the sound check. So I guess my first question is, it's more of an observation. It's not really a question. And 10 songs, over half of them are almost 6 minutes long. And it feels like this record's it's a lot more patient than maybe some of the previous records, and it's a slower burn. And I found myself sort of with each listen, I don't know what you call those things when you're in high school, where you kind of made them out of paper and you kind of open them. I called them a cootie catcher, but I don't know what you call them.
Were you bored? So were you like fidgeting?
No, but I'm just analogizing it to the songs that like each time I listen to it, that like there's something new that I kind of discover. There's a lot of nooks and crannies in them.
Right, with the different messages.
Right, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So I wasn't bored.
Okay, I thought you were like, I had to find something to do. Fair enough.
Terrible analogy.
Yeah. No, I get it now. Now I like it.
So it was just a lot more patient, and they're longer. And I wonder if you could speak to that, because it doesn't quite have the immediacy of maybe some of the previous records. And I know you kind of said you were going back to a different kind of approach.
I think, honestly, like I feel like all of us as music fans, myself included, aren't really given enough credit as such. Like I think like when you look at some of the records that have proven themselves to be hailed as the greatest of all time, whether that's like in rock and roll music, whether that's Dark Side of the Moon or Brothers in Arms, or records where they show you the respect of taking its time and letting and trusting that you're gonna stick with it. Like Us and Them off of Dark Side of the Moon, like the chords present themselves, and then there's a saxophone solo before the song even starts. So you're like 2 minutes in before they start singing those lyrics. And I love it. And I feel like as a listener, you're allowed to like get familiar with what's about to happen, rather than there being some shadow of some label saying like, make sure you get right in there. That's a big chorus, and we need to be at the chorus by 30 seconds in. And I realize that is very much of a structure that music needs to adhere to if you're playing that game. But I just feel like with so much music that I love, it can enter into 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes, and it doesn't become more of a challenge. It just becomes more of an enriching listen. For me as a fan, and not that I think that just by making our songs long meant that they were going to be fun to listen to, but it just felt like, we want to have this piano intro on Crack the Case, and it's going to take a minute and a half before the actual progression of the song starts. That's something we want to do, so we're going to do it, and it feels appropriate to like how to get into this. And so it was considerations like that I think, if anything, motivated us beyond just, well, it sounds good, was just the fact that people aren't given enough credit as listeners, if that makes sense.
Well, I think you're crediting your fans out here to say, hey, we're gonna stick with it. So, this is a question from Justin Budlow. Justin,
look right at you and I
look
answer.
at that. Well played, sir. I'm going to piggyback low because this is a good question. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. What music were you listening to while recording Passwords?
We're always listening to different stuff, and
So after John Mayer and I asked you that same question.
oh, right on.
You said Kiko by Los.
Yes, I was listening to Kiko by Los Lobos. Yeah, that record rules. But we were not listening to that when we made Passwords. Different ends of a spectrum. On one hand, we were listening to, I was kind of discovering Wayne Shorter for the first time. I'd I feel like jazz music was always hard for me to access, and through him and his earlier records, I felt like I was, I don't know if it's his phrasing or just his compositions, but it was something where I felt like it allowed me into that world, and so I would be showing up to the studio every day to ask Griffin and Lee, because they're jazz heads, because I was listening a lot to Speak No Evil. I think I'm saying that right. Or maybe it's Hear No Evil. I could be getting that wrong. That's what a jazz fan I am. But I was really loving this album and listening to it on the way to the studio every day. So I would ask Griffin and Lee, like, who's in that band and how does that progression work? And they would kind of be explaining it all to me. And Jonathan, our producer, Jonathan Wilson, he kind of was acknowledging that as well, like that I was getting into this stuff. So it found its way in a lot of ways, just as through osmosis, just by listening. But even more directly than that, when we were trying to figure out how to record a certain song on the album called Time Flies Either Way, it's the last song on the album, we didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to play it. I just knew the chords, and I showed the guys, and we just didn't know what the treatment was going to be. And Jonathan had said, like, why don't you've been talking about Wayne Shorter a lot, why don't you like try to play a jazz song? And so it allowed Lee and Griffin to use those chops that they have, and it allowed Wiley and I to kind of root it. We even had a amazing saxophone player come in and play on it. So that was like a very direct way where our influences were affecting the session. And then also, really serendipitously, I mean, I feel like it's almost a requirement as a rock and roll fan to, at some point, spend some time with ELO records. And we've always loved ELO. I've always like had my favorite songs and my favorite albums, but for some reason with this album, it was really a fixture of our conversations. It was not a reference in the sense of like we wanted to sound like, Mr. Blue Sky or something, because nothing on this album does, but as much as I'd like it to. But it was more just like, this reminds me of a choice they might make with a certain sound or whatever. And then after that, we finished the record. We heard like, you guys are being offered to go on tour with ELO. So that was like this crazy coincidence of us kind of rediscovering our deep affinity for this band. And then they come out of tour retirement, because they haven't toured for like 35 years or something. So it was like, that was a really kind of wild moment. Like, wow, what there's no better record of ours to go promote while opening for ELO than this one. So it felt really cool.
Shameless plug for the album. There's a website, passwords.dawestheband.com. I don't know if you guys have checked it out, but there's sort of passwords everywhere. And if you go to the website, it will the first one it kind of gives you for free. It will unlock Griffin's playlist on Spotify, which is still secret. But to your point, when I unlocked it, I was quite surprised. It was basically all jazz records, including like a 1972 Keith Jarrett record that I was like, Expressions? Like, who puts this on their playlist? But my understanding is that he's going to update it every couple weeks with 3 albums that he's
cool.
listening to. So
yeah, he got me into that Keith Jarrett record too. It's really good.
Not an obvious choice.
Yeah. I show them all of the really like boring long songs with too much lyrics, and then they show me all the wordless jazz stuff that's really well recorded. That's how the band works.
Well, maybe shifting to words a little bit. Is it fair to say, and it feels to me anyway, that there's an emotional arc to this record? I feel like we start the record and there's a lot of anxiety and resignation, and by the time we end up with the last 2 songs, Never Gonna Say Goodbye and Time Flies Either Way, I feel like everything's gonna be okay. I mean, that's how I felt, at least. Like I felt like there was some peace with what's happened, and like we're gonna get through it. Is that a fair assessment, or is that just me projecting?
No, I'm actually so stoked that you're hearing that, because it was really intentional, I guess. It's not like the songs were written in reaction to each other by any means, but once the song did exist, there were certain considerations of like a song like Stay Down. It was important to me that the record didn't end with that, or that it even had it in the back half, because it was a outlook. It was an anxious, neurotic outlook of like, maybe the best thing for me to do is to like give up and to just recede into the shadows and just never be around again. And it's like it's a comforting idea for a second, but then when really sat with, it's like, no, that's like an ugly approach to life. That's in a long-term sense. And so for me, it was like that can't be what we leave a listening experience with, because it's not how I feel. It's a place for the rest of the record to arc out from. And so it is intentional that the album starts with Living in the Future and Stay Down, and then by the end it ends with those other two songs. There was two things kind of going on for me listening or writing these songs. One was that it feels like such a curious moment to be alive, and I felt that to not acknowledge it in whatever language I would approach it with would have felt not true to what a record should be. I mean, to me, a record is always an indication of what's on your mind and where you're at a certain point in your life. And to not talk about what it means to be alive in America in 2017 and 18 in a fairly direct way, I would have felt that was irresponsible for my own relationship with my music. So there's that going on very clearly with songs like Living in the Future or Crack the Case, or even Stay Down or Feed the Fire, and then at the same time, these last few years, I've been falling in love and getting engaged. And like this has been a very different time in my life that I've never experienced before. And so I feel like with these, especially with the last two songs on the record, like Time Flies Either Way feels this culmination of both of those things coming together. This like what it feels like to be alive at the moment, but also like how my faith in someone else and my feelings for someone else can serve as that meaning that I'm like struggling with finding. And by devoting to something like that, it can be enough to at least feel like you're taking a first step towards making things better, at least within your own little universe.
Thank you. Our next fan question, forgive me if I don't pronounce your name correctly, is from Lavinia Curletta. And her question is what books have you been reading that may have influenced the new songs?
Always reading a ton of books. With these new ones, specifically, there's been a few things. The Return of Saturn, that was a big one. No, The Rings of Saturn. The Return of Saturn is a No Doubt song. Also, cool. I can't believe I remember that. That's like in my 13-year-old brain. Or it's a cop-out, and I was listening to it earlier today. The Rings of Saturn by Sebald. I don't know how to pronounce his last name correctly. Sebald. But I really loved that book, and I felt like the mood of that was informative. While we were recording, I was reading The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño. The songs were kind of all written at that point, but it was really fun to read while we were recording. And then, I remember when I was like 18 or something, I was talking to a producer friend, and he'd said, like, if you look at every prolific songwriter that anyone gives a shit about, they all are like tearing through books. And I wasn't really much of a reader, but I loved Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen and Elvis Costello and David Bowie, and I love these really epic writers. And sure enough, like the more I kind of did the math on friends and writers that would just kind of show up with material. And not to say there aren't amazing writers that don't read. I mean, Neil Young has claimed to not be a reader. Kanye West, can you believe it? But there's still great writers that don't read. But I find that for myself, that's always like dictated. The input has dictated the output. So that was, and then I read a lot of David Foster Wallace during that time. Those really informed the songs as well, I feel like.
It's amazing you still have time to write songs when you read that much.
I've heard that Jeff Tweedy actually had said, and maybe I'm misquoting, I don't know, but I'd heard that he had said in an interview, when he stopped reading, he found that he wrote more. And maybe that's true, and he writes great songs, so obviously it's like working out for him. But yeah, I mean, also like touring is like the best job ever for reading because you don't have to do anything till you play. Like I like sound checks at 4, so all I have to do is find a shower, and sometimes not, and then other than that, it's like just have an excuse for like resting my voice, and then like reading a book all day. So reading is actually really easy to do when you're in a band.
Well, speaking of writing, I've always thought of you as a fairly exact writer. That, and maybe this has changed, but when we spoke a few years ago, it was not the case that Dawes would go into the studio with 20 or 30 songs, be like, oh, I don't know what to do, which ones we're going to pick. It was a very specific number, and you really wrote to the record. There wasn't really a lot of extra songs hanging out. Is that still the case? Are you still a pretty exact writer in that way? And was there really like any extra songs that didn't make this record or didn't fit with this record from a tonality or theme perspective?
There were, I mean, typically we go in with about 14 and we end up with between like 9 and 12. And this time we went in with 17, I think, and we came out with 10. I think that it was just, I don't know why we had more songs. I think the only reason why we didn't even really approach all of them because our producer is actually in Roger Waters' band, and so he's really busy on that tour. And he was kind of like, we have these 2 weeks in December or November, I forget. I think it was November, and then this 1 week in January, and that's all the time I have. So we had to kind of pare it down before. So even though we had like 17 songs, when we went in with him, we only like approached 12 or 13. So, but then also like for me, every time a song doesn't make a record, we just hold on to it, and then it finds a life somehow. Like there's a song on We're All Gonna Die called Picture of a Man, and that's our 5th record, and that we have a version of that we tried for Stories Don't End, our 3rd record, and then we tried it again for All Your Favorite Bands on our 4th record, and neither of them it just didn't feel good enough. Like it felt like this is the weakest thing for this, and then with We're All Gonna Die, because of this new approach and this new treatment, it felt like one of the most exciting songs. So we never really give up on any. Like sometimes I hear these kind of like tossed aside tunes from some of my favorite bands where it's like, oh, that didn't make that Replacements album, or that didn't make that Bob Dylan record, and I'm always kind of confounded because it's like, well, it's so good. Why wouldn't you just like not release it and put it on the next one if it works, obviously? And some of our songs we've tried to make it work and it never did, and it never will. Or at least that's how it feels right now. But things always tend to bleed over. There was even a few songs on this one, or I think just one song on this one, that was born out of the We're All Gonna Die sessions, and then we kind of made it work for this one. So that's always kind of going on with me. But there's never like 30 to 50 songs like some of those stories you hear. I wouldn't know what to do with that. Like if a song's not gonna be good enough, I probably just won't finish it. I don't know.
Next fan question is from Sharon Verdejo. She wants to know, did I get that right, hopefully? Who started the thought that was Griff phenomenon or movement?
That was me. Because, I mean, it's like he's so unique looking, beautiful, but he just, like, you don't see, like, that hair ever. Those eyes and that beard. And so with so the times that I do see someone that like, it's not like, oh, that person looks like my brother. It's like, that's him. Oh no, it's not. Like I always assume it's Griffin, and then it just got out of hand and we started like picking mean pictures of dogs and stuff. He's a good sport. He's a really good sport. We also had Young Santa for a while because he was wearing all red all the time with his white hair and beard. So he had sort of like that ended up being a bit for a while. It was funnier to me, I think, than anybody else, but still worth it.
He does have a lot of looks, in fairness.
Yeah.
So we have time for one more question. I'm gonna put the last 2 fan questions together in one, even though they're not necessarily connected. One is from Leslie Chaikin, and the other is from Justin Guillermo. What is your biggest inspiration for your songwriting, and what are you most excited for this year?
I'm required to say I'm most excited about getting married. No, I definitely am. That's gonna happen before the year's over, and I actually couldn't. I can't. It can't come soon enough. I'm really excited. But about the band, this ELO tour is gonna be so cool, and it's gonna be a dream come true. But honestly, and I would assume that good old Jeff Lynne, who I don't know, would appreciate this. But I'm most excited to go do the headlining shows. I'm most excited to go back to doing the evening with Dawes and play for, because by the end of the last tour we were playing for like 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Is it another 2-set kind of format?
Yeah, and we're gonna now that we have a 6th album, like I'm sure the shows will be that much longer or a little bit longer. So I'm really excited to get back into that groove, because that's when we feel our strongest, and then hopefully get enough songs written to start thinking about the next one.
Taylor, we thank you very, very much for your time. We thank the band one more time, ladies and gentlemen. Taylor.